This morning, we are with Stephen Eubank, who's with the Biocomplexity Institute at the University of Virginia. And he is one of the co-PIs on our expeditions project. So welcome, Stephen. How would you define the primary focus of your research today and what your goals are now?
Well, what I'm doing right now is trying to figure out how the structure of a contact network dictates the way diseases spread and how you could change that contact network most efficiently to keep the disease from spreading on it. But this, of course, it's a specific case of a really general problem of how anything spreads over a network and how you can control that spread by changing the network structure. I got here because of my interest in epidemiology in particular and in agent-based modeling, where we take into account what each person does, who they come into contact with, or each host of an infectious disease. And in particular, what kinds of interventions, social distancing kinds of interventions, are most likely to prevent the spread of disease.
So I'm going to back you up just a little bit because you said agent-based modeling. So since you specified agent-based modeling, that implies that there are other kinds of models. What are the primary models that are used, and what are the differences in those models, generally speaking?
Yeah, a lot of the models that are used for epidemiology, especially, have been, I like to think of them as sort of shake and bake models. You got a bag full of disease and you put a bunch of people in it and you shake it really hard and some of them get infected. I mean, it's important that you have some sort of a model, but we're pretty much done with that kind of model, I'd say. We know how it behaves. And the kinds I'm more interested in are the ones that really let you examine at much smaller scales how disease is spreading in within communities and between communities.
Okay, so the agent-based models give us that granular glimpse. It's more nuanced and focuses in.
Exactly.
Okay, excellent. Just in case people aren't sure, I myself, not being a scientist, although I'm around them enough that it's kind of rubbed off on me a smidge. So within the context of expeditions, your work obviously is critical, this contact network, as we all learn about contact tracing and that sorts of things and how disease spread. So within the broader expeditions community and the work that this project's trying to do, how do you see that part enhancing that overall work?
I see what I'm doing as it's going to be a little while before it's applicable to things like coming up with actual interventions in society right now, because there's several stages to this. What I'm trying to do is find out what an optimal solution would be if you knew the exact contact network and you knew everything you need to know about the people in it. And we'll never have that knowledge. But if you have some other solution and you want to know how close to optimal is it, you can't do that unless you know what the optimum is. So a lot of people are sort of comparing the results they get with their solutions and saying, well, this one's better than that one, this one's better than that one. But you don't really know how close you're getting to the optimal unless you know what the optimal is. So that's how I see this work fitting in. It's not like I'm going to come downstairs and say, oh, well, if we isolate this guy over here, then we won't have any more problems and ever again.
Right.
But I'll be able to say, yeah, this is significantly better than that, but you're still a long way off from the best you could be doing. And let's see if we could work on this a little bit more.
Right. Fine tune it. So I know your background is in physics, which seems to me to be very, very different from public health. But maybe not. But how did you make that leap?
This is going to be a long story.
I know. In 5 words or less. No, I'm kidding.
How did I make that leap in 5 words or less? I closed my eyes.
Yeah.
jumped.
Oh, I like it. I closed my eyes, jumped. I like that a lot. Yeah, was it you were, I'm guessing you were just exposed, as so frequently happens, you kept saying yes to different opportunities, and here you are.
Yeah, I pretty much I have a friend who says I followed my nose. So whatever I looked at, basically, I went and did that for a while. And there's a part of physics called dynamical systems that led me to studying, I guess, the transportation network with Chris and Madhav and transportation systems. And that led pretty naturally to developing an estimated contact network for a large region, which nobody had ever really been able to put together before.
Right.
So we took advantage of, at that point, it was kind of low-hanging fruit. Hey, we know how everybody comes into contact with everybody else. What would happen if you just put an infectious disease here? How would it spread? The timing was good too, I suppose, because there was a lot of interest just then in whether or not you could control a smallpox outbreak if one would happen. And we happened to have an answer to that was kind of different from what other people had been doing. And also, it was just intuitively a nice way to approach the problem, as opposed to the shake and bake kind of models.
In retrospect, it seems so obvious, as so many things do in retrospect. Like, of course, just like as you said from the beginning, contact networks. It's a big giant network, and everyone understands what that is, and things are plugged into some things and not plugged into other things. And yeah, so it seems obvious now, but I know it wasn't when you were doing it. Did you meet with a lot of skepticism?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Although I have to say that there were some people in the public health community who were really receptive to new ideas, and that helped a lot. The fact that they came from somebody with a physics background was sometimes an advantage and sometimes not so much.
Right.
Physicists tend to simplify situations so they can analyze them. So they invent lots of symmetries and regularities in a problem. And public health people don't appreciate that very much. It's a really bad habit if you want to, if you want to inform policy decisions, right, to pretty much assume away all the hard parts and tell them what the solution to the easy part is. Yeah. But once you got past that kind of skepticism, then there wasn't really a lot of pushback. I mean, one person in particular heard about the model and said, oh, okay, so when you model malaria, that means you're going to be modeling every mosquito, right? And every time they bite a person. And I said, well, no, that's kind of, ridiculous argument. And that person is now modeling every mosquito in large clouds of mosquitoes.
You're kidding. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, you planted that seed in their head, right? The initial response is like, whoa, no, but then wait a minute, maybe we can do that.
Yeah, I think it was more people not realizing that they could do it. It was always something that was fairly obvious, like you said. I mean, this is what we'd like to be able to do, but we'll never be able to do that. So let's focus over here.
Right.
And we just came along and said, well, here's a way you could do it. And it's not perfect, but let's explore this a little bit more.
Yeah.
And we're still exploring it 20 years later.
Right. And still will be, I think, 20 years into the future, we'll still be talking about refining that and making it better. So in your experience, when you think back of the research that you've done, the people that you've met, the physical places that you've gone to, what would you say is one of the most interesting or weirdest or surreal places that your research has taken you?
Well, it goes along with how did I end up doing research that I'm doing. I've done a lot of different things. So I've been on the floor of the trading floor in Chicago. I've been inside the Biosphere 2.
Ooh, very cool.
The most unusual research project that I was involved in for a physicist was a natural language processing project.
Yes, that doesn't really go
which
hand
also
in
took
hand.
me to Japan, which was a wonderful experience for a couple of years. I'd say those are the ones that stand out in my mind.
Right, right. And again, and this is something that every researcher I've spoken to has said, and we talked about it a little bit before, that you followed your nose to the next thing. You said yes to these maybe strange opportunities, these things that didn't seem to fit with what you were doing, but someone saw a connection and asked you, and you said yes and went. And I think that's such an important message for young researchers.
If I could give a researcher who's just starting out some advice, I would say, whatever you did your thesis on, it was wonderful, it was terrific. Now find something else to do. Don't spend your life refining every little bell and whistle on your PhD dissertation.
Right.
There was an experimentalist where I got my degree who had done that for like 40 years. And I can't imagine a career like that. On the other hand, I heard a talk by a Nobel Prize winner who he had just run into a brick wall in the research he was doing. He was a physicist. So he said, so I went into computer science for 10 years. And while I was there, I ran into something that let me solve the problem I had to start with.
That kind of, again, touches on what you said before about applying the transportation network to smallpox. It's that same sort of thing. Looking at something from a completely different discipline opens up your brain to different opportunities.
Exactly. And the very specific research that I'm doing right now is on a general problem that's well known in computer science. And it turns out that it's exactly the same as a problem I worked on in my dissertation.
Oh, wow. And here you are.
And here I am coming full circle, sort of. So
Right.
I'm not saying don't go back to that work ever. Just, branch out, do something different. Remember that what you did in graduate school was you learned how to approach problems and think about them in new ways and find answers where people hadn't been looking before. And that's not confined to the specific problem you were working on. It's just a skill you have. And take advantage of that.
I think that is a great way to put it. You're not learning necessarily about the specific topic. You're really learning how to research, how to ask questions, how to get a hold of something and follow it through. Yeah, outstanding. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Sure.